Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us in this panel discussion hosted by Women Banding Together. I'm Jenny Allen, one of the co-founders of Women Banding Together, and I'm a retired Army band conductor and also a member of the faculty at Juilliard. We're thrilled to include a distinguished panel of music educators to talk with us today about reflecting on our classroom and communities through the lens of Black Lives Matter. First, though, I want to introduce the other co-founders of Women Banding Together. Jenny Neff is Associate Professor of Music Education and Director of the MM and Summer Music Studies and is an active presenter and guest conductor, and she's at University of the Arts in Philadelphia. Lori Schwartz Reichl is an author, educator, and consultant and founder of MakingKeyChanges.com. Laura Johnson is the assistant conductor for the Bay Youth Wind Symphony and will be a band director in the Chesapeake School District this fall. Just very quickly, I want to tell you the purpose of Women Banding Together in case you haven't joined us for one of our sessions before. We were organized to support women band directors, and we want to help by cultivating mentoring relationships for women band directors at all levels. We want to guide and connect directors who seek support. We want to create a platform to explore issues of women band directors. And we also want to provide advice and guidance for anyone who wants to mentor women band directors. A couple of administrative announcements or details before we get started. We would like to share a screenshot of this session on social media after the session has concluded. And if you have any objections to having your picture taken, if you would put a comment into the chat section, section, then we'll honor your wishes, but we would love to be able to share whatever we can get a screenshot of. Please stay muted unless you're asking a question during our Q&A at the end of the session. And also feel free to use the chat to everyone feature to post comments and questions at any time during this session. So I'm going to hand it off now to Jenny, who is facilitating this session and has done a terrific job of organizing all of it. Jenny?
Thanks so much, Jenny. We're honored and delighted to have 4 outstanding guest panelists with us for reflecting on our classrooms and communities through the lens of Black Lives Matter. First, we have Dr. Wesley Broadnax. He is Associate Professor and Director of Bands at the University of Northern Colorado. We have Damien Crutcher, who is the CEO of Crescendo Detroit. He's also the conductor of the Farmington Community Band, Detroit Symphony Orchestra's Civic Youth Concert Band, and Detroit Community Band. We also have Anoa Green. She is the coordinator of Wind Studies at Baltimore School for the Arts. And we have Shameka Nash, who is the Fine Arts Department Chair at Morgan Park High School in Chicago. Thank you all for being with us today to talk about this important topic and share your insights. I recently read a post shared by Eric Scheninger from his blog, A Principal's Reflections, entitled, "Are Schools Ready for What Comes Next?" In addition to post-COVID-19 planning considerations, Scheninger identified another article by Cornelius Minor, which was entitled, "Why Black Lives Matter in Your Classroom Too." I found this to be a helpful resource for educators to read and act on as they return to their classrooms. The article focused on types of racism, as well as the influence educators can have in their classrooms. Minor stated, "We can start to disrupt the status quo by asking ourselves questions about our practice, community, and curriculum." So we decided to focus on these areas with our panelists today as we discuss ways to reflect on our practice, community, and curriculum as music educators. Our questions will more specifically address safety, choice, voice, growth, and flexibility. These have been modified from the original questions presented in Cornelius Minor's article. We'll also be sharing those, both of those, the article and the blog, with you after the session in an email. So we'll start with the topic of safety. We all know that educators We know as educators that in order for students to learn, they need to feel safe. And so I'd like to pose the first questions to Shamika, and those are, how can we make sure the classroom is a place where children feel safe and protected? And just to dig a little deeper with that, how can we ensure the sustained management of the room while communicating respect without cultivating fear or embarrassment or teacher dependence? So Shamika, if you could share, that would be great.
Hello everyone, can you hear me? Okay, great. So the title of the session today is reflecting, through the through the lens of Black Lives Matter. And I think it's important to discuss or talk about where the whole slogan came from, or the hashtag Black Lives Matter. So the organization started in response to Trayvon Martin's murder and the acquittal, everything that happened with that. So the organization basically started because a young man was killed, a black young man was killed because he was in a neighborhood where someone thought that he shouldn't be, and based on the way he looked, on what he was wearing, the color of his skin. And that helps us to really understand a problem that we have in our country, but it also helps us to figure out a solution that we need to have as educators. And that is the first thing of just love for all people. And I explained it before on another panel, that is having agape love, and that's a complete love for all people, and not the gushy love that we talk about where you're in love with someone, but we're talking about having a love and respect for all people. And as an educator, what you have to do first is works on yourself and take some time to reflect and figure out what it is about another person or group of people that would even give you a reason to have something negative or something that is out of love. That's the first thing. So you have to decide, did you learn something from a movie? Is that something that you saw and then all of a sudden you have some sort of perception of someone? Is it a real life experience that you've had with another group of people? And then working on that and figuring out where your biases are. And then as a teacher, when you welcome all your students to class, you have to let those students know that everyone is welcome. And you do that as we are all conductors, through the way that we communicate with all the students. Everyone that comes into class, whether it's standing at the door and greeting them, having those side conversations, and really letting the students know that everyone is welcome. They can all speak in the class. They can all have ways of sharing. So in terms of safety, I think that was the first question. Let me just make sure. But in terms of safety, you really want to make sure that all the students know that you love them. And I want to also make sure that I'm clear in saying that to show your students that you love them and you care about them doesn't mean that you lower your standards either. You still have to have your high standards. You still have to demand excellence, and they will know that you love them because you demand the excellence from them. My students know that I'm tough, but they know that I love them, and that's why I'm tough, and that's why I'm on their case, and so on and so forth. So I just want to make sure it doesn't mean huggy time. That means you still expect them to do whatever they're supposed to. If they have to have their scales in order, or if you want things a certain way, all those things still count. But you're making sure that you're really taking the time to let them know that you love them. And then you just continue to insist on excellence from every student. So I think that's pretty much it for my first response.
Great, thank you so much. I'd like to ask Anoa to share her thoughts on this area of safety as well.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Shamika. That was great as far as just even communicating the title for us and the notion of Black Lives Matter, the movement of Black Lives Matter. My take on safety, and as far as these questions are concerned, I know that safety is extremely important to our students, and they have been thrown a whirlwind of problems these last 3-4 months. And I can't imagine, you know, specifically what they're all going through. I know what I'm going through, and it is not pretty. You know, every day is not a pretty, happy day, but I do try to find some joy and hope in my daily life. So with regards to safety, I feel like students have to really trust you. They really have to know what to expect from you. And that really only comes if you really engender that in your community and in your classroom and in your relationships with them, okay? So, you know, I didn't want to go here yet, but I do really feel like your relationship with the student has to be consistent in all areas. They shouldn't come in on a Monday and say, oh, Miss Green's happy today. And then on Friday, you know, if they left their pencil, their red pencil somewhere, that, you know, all of a sudden Miss Green is somebody else, you know, Miss Green is somebody else. They have to know that, you know, what Shamika was talking about, the expectations, but then what are the consequences, right? I know my consequences, and that makes me feel that I can trust you, you know, that makes me feel safe, and that routine and order. So that's just a point there. I do also think that in order to establish safety, especially in the beginning of our school year coming up, that we are going to need to talk and discuss things in an open platform where students can feel that they can express themselves no matter what, okay? So for example, I think our school, Baltimore School for the Arts, had a equity but an equity audit. And we are a performing arts school, and we decided that we wanted to do that so that we could sort of really deconstruct and analyze what was happening in our school, because it was clear there were things happening to the students and as far as the environment that made, as far as especially our Black students, our brown students, and those who are underrepresented, to feel like they're not, you know, completely at a same equity level as their white counterparts. And so one thing that I wanted to say was, one of the things that we did was we had a wonderful psychologist, Dr. Tara Doty, to come in, and she talked to us about her work, and she did kind of clinics and workshops with us. And one thing that she did with us that I thought was very useful at the beginning of the year was setting norms. Setting norms, I don't know how many of you do that in your classroom, but I feel like it's really helpful. And I have done that in the past, but I didn't always stick to it, because sometimes I just want you to do what I say. But I think that norms are important, and they help the students to feel like they're a part of the classroom environment. So normalizing that is very important. And on day one, you know, what does it mean to feel safe for you guys? What is a safe space for you? And you'll find they have many, many different responses. I need a quiet room. I need, you know, I need people to listen to me without putting up their eyebrow. You know, I need certain things. I need to feel like my environment is clean. There are a plethora of things they'll come up with. And then later on, what's really cool about it is you can reference your norms. Maybe you can have it in the classroom or wherever you are, or you can, and students will start referencing it, you know, like, oh my gosh, I thought I told you guys I needed quiet to learn, you know. And so this helps with providing sort of a supportive environment when you sort of set that out. Wow, I'm talking so much. The next thing is that I feel like you have to normalize listening and transparency as well. I think students do well when, you know, the sheet is not, you know, there's not a lot of boundary between you and giving information. And you know, that's on a case-to-case basis. If certain things you need to keep to yourself, but I think transparency is really key about your decisions on certain things. And so try not to be taken off guard when somebody says, well, why are we doing this, Miss Green? Why do we have to go down the street and play for this thing? Or, you know, they thrive, I think, and you earn respect and earn their trust when you are transparent. And also listening, you know, we talk about listening a lot in music, you know, it can be fixed by listening, right? That musical thing can be fixed by listening. This can be applied to any issues that you may have in the classroom. I also want to say that please don't pretend that issues of race do not exist, okay? I appreciate this panel and the title of this panel because it says flat out, Black Lives Matter. What are we gonna talk about in the fall, okay? What questions can we ask? And I've gotten permission to share something from an association that that I'm a part of that we just began. It's called the Association of Black Women Band Directors. And they have actually been working on a document to address these very issues. And I just wanted to share some questions that I've gotten permission from Dr. Maya Roden to share with you all. And the first is, what is racism? Ask that question of your students. Whether or not you have Black students in front of you or not, this is important to say and really be clear about this for everybody. What is racism? Do all lives matter, right? We hear that a lot, and we've been hearing, you know, rebuttals against that. There should be discourse about that. How are these racially charged events impacting you? That could be 2 days, you know, that could be a week. What is your perspective on the latest events? And these can get you going with some ideas about what to address with your students right from the bat. But the safety having to do with listening, being transparent, setting some norms so we can all sort of deal with this together.
Great. Thanks so much, Noah. That's great insights. Those are great insights. I'm going to turn it over to Lori to cover the next topic.
Great. Thank you, Shamika and Anoa. We're actually going to stick with Shamika and Anoa for our next category, which is choice. And this question is, children succeed when they feel capable and motivated. How can we create consistent opportunities to do work that has both meaning and consequence? Anoa, would you like to start first, please?
Sure. So the definition of choice is an act or possibility of choosing, an act or possibility of choosing. So when I took a look at this topic of choice, children succeed when they feel capable and motivated. How can we create opportunities to do the work? So I thought about a lot of areas. So bear with me. I'm going to try to get through a few of these. Okay, so number one was curriculum reform. Okay, curriculum reform. How can we provide opportunities that can include everyone in the classroom? We can start by actually looking at our curriculum and challenging our curriculum in order to you know, ameliorate it, make it better, extend the learning to different topics that might resonate more with our Black and Brown students, okay? And also on the flip side of this, with our white students, to give them some information, okay? And things that they may not be getting from any other teacher or any other place in their lives, their homes, their church, you know, wherever they may go. This is important for us as educators to try our best to get some curriculum going. And there are many resources out there to help with that. And I did include a resource again from the ABWBD that hopefully will be linked for you guys, but there are many things about diversity in the classroom that you can work on, and lots of tools there. So think about your curriculum first. I have for 15 years or 14 years, I have a very traditional curriculum. I'm not happy about it, you know, I'm not happy about it. And for years I've been sort of struggling mentally, like, because I'm like, well, they have to have this, because if they don't have this, you know, talking about your Bach, your Mozart in my history class. If they don't have this, then, you know, they need to have, they're going to be playing this music. They need to have a place to start from. But it's not inclusive, you know, it's not inclusive. And as a Black woman, it's sort of a weird place to be, you know, teaching all of this curriculum about white faces, male predominantly, and there's a dissonance there. There's a true dissonance that I feel that, you know, and there's a whole world of music that we're ignoring. And so I have begun to include American music, specifically blues, jazz, hip hop, funk, in my courses. I may not get to everything, but I think that's okay, you know, and you're gonna have to figure out ways to figure out what's good for them to get, and then give them that other stuff that's gonna really hold them. I felt like when I talked about the Chevalier of Saint George, you know, what they say is the Black Mozart, all of a sudden, all of my Black students, their eyes just lit up, you know, they were ready to go. They had questions. They were like, why didn't we know about this before? And, you know, all these great things. So we have to look at our curriculum. Number two, choice, also independent projects. I feel like this works really well in the band room, in the classroom as well. Give your students independent projects that they could research on their own. And I want to say, number three, giving students choice in repertoire or historical study. And I'm not sure, Laura, if you talk about this a lot with, I think you did, you gave a nice session at WBDI a few weeks ago. And I think you're right on. It's just really, really important to give our students some choice in their learning. It helps them to take ownership of what they're doing. I would say that give them choices, give them many choices. And as a caveat, require some things, require some other things. So, you know, I gave a project where I said you have to study somebody of a diverse nature from in the classical world. And then I had a few students of, unfortunately, they thought that diversity could mean that you were from Spain, but you could still be of European descent, not necessarily, you know, a Black person, a brown person. You know, there's so much in there. So sometimes you do need to say, no, you should study this, okay? And let's take a look at that. All right, I'm running out of time, but I'll say this, that my last point, a few of my last points here, mentorship is a way to help students to give what they've learned to their younger peers. I love how the Alpha Stigma movement has done some of this. I think that it can work within your building to teach the senior students teaching your younger students. This will help them feeling like they have some buy-in. Give them some leadership roles. Let them choose their part for a piece, okay? The percussion especially, they love to do that. So, you know, figure out a way to get them to choose so that they have more intrinsic motivation and it boosts their self-efficacy.
Thank you, Anoa. Moving on to Shamika, that same question of choices for you also.
Okay, so as an educator and a band director, I definitely have an authoritative style. And I start the year off that way, but then it quickly moves to student choice and allowing them to have a lot of options. So when I get the repertoire ready, I do let the students give me input in terms of some repertoire that they want to play for sure. And I also try to create scenarios that are going to have some relevance to what we're doing in band class, or to try to find ways to make it relatable to the everyday situation. So in our band, we'll do mock college auditions, and basically they're going to play their scales and some solo pieces, and then that's going to lead to a solo recital. But then those are all things that the kids prepare on their own. I have like a huge solo library, and I lay out the books, and they can pick their different pieces that way. And now in terms of how I actually practically make that work in a band situation, is using smart music and making sure the accompaniments are there to help so that the students can practice on their own. My students don't have lessons. And I'll meet with every student once a week to go over their solo. And, you know, I basically have like a little cheat sheet to remind them, you know, the start of the slower tempo, research all the terms in the piece, look at the articulations, and then I'll work with each student once a week. So like, and with the mock college auditions, sometimes I'll invite clinicians in or other friend band directors and set up other classrooms and let them go in. And I'll have like a little banner outside the door, like DePaul or Northern Illinois, whatever, so that they can just have the opportunity to have some sort of like real world experience, and that lets them know that their choices that they've made for the music matter, you know. And then also a lot of student leaders, we always have those in band. I don't think I need to spend a lot of time with the student leaders, but definitely making sure that the section leaders and drum majors, they have group chats, making sure like I will directly tell them, okay, if you guys want to perform this piece, make sure you have enough input from people if you want to do this, especially with marching band. I will have student arrangers, and I use flat.io in my class. And once you teach the students how to cut and paste a MIDI file, or just how to open a MIDI file in Flat, and it's a piece that they know already, and you just have to show them a few things about how to make an arrangement, they're off and running. And I've had about 4 students who actually have pretty good arrangements, and they will start to sell them. So for especially marching band, where we do play the popular music, they definitely have the student choice. They pretty much pick everything, I think, for marching band and things like that. And then, you know, in terms of the concert band side, same thing. Like I said, I do let the students choose pieces, but I also am not afraid to stick with traditional things for the band. Like one of our favorite pieces one year was a chaconne by Larry Dane that he had arranged. It was a Bach chaconne, and you would never believe that you know they loved chaconne. And it was one of their favorites. They couldn't wait to play that piece like every day. And of all the things we had all these other things. We had a Quincy Hilliard thing on there, and some other, maybe I think we had like a Yete Shabazz piece also. But they loved chaconne. It was a simple, just like 8-measure chaconne from Bach that Larry Dane arranged. That was the highlight. So I want to say, don't feel like you have to change everything that you're doing, because the students still love the standard traditional pieces. Just because their culture is a little bit different, they still, good music is good music. Good repertoire is good repertoire, period. Everybody will love it. Doesn't matter what culture we come from. Doesn't matter how much hip hop they listen to. Sometimes I wish I had recorded their reaction when it was time to play, because I don't think people would believe, and the same thing, even when we would play Air for Band as a warm-up, or if we do Salvation's Created, those are the people, they can't wait. They love those. And so make sure that you do go to Music by Black Composers. Go to those websites and allow the students to pick from there, like a composer that they may be interested in, and then we can try to find those pieces, because sometimes those are harder to get. But when you go to J.W. Pepper, you can also go to Music by Black Composers and let the students pick and choose someone that they're interested in from there. But I think that's pretty much all that I have for that.
Thank you, Shamika. Thank you, Anoa.
The next topic we're going to be talking about is voice, and this will be going to Dr. Broadnax and Anoa. So this question is, when students have a voice, they feel empowered. When so much of childhood is about staying quiet and listening to adults, how can we give students a platform to share what is important to them?
Okay, can everyone hear me? Okay, great. First and foremost, I want to just say again, I'm very honored to be on this panel with my esteemed colleagues. This is just wonderful. When I was thinking about this term voice, The one thing that came to mind is I was that young Black kid in middle school and high school that felt like I didn't have a voice, that I had to really work hard to try and carve that in my life. Part of it had to do with the fact that I felt like I had good band directors at the time that gave me that opportunity. But when we talk about today and a Black or brown person having a voice in the music classroom, um, I think some of the most tangible ways to do that is to first and foremost do everything you can to recognize their talent and acknowledge it. That's the first thing. If we don't do that, I think that's where we're missing the ballpark, because I think in every one of our music courses, there's going to be the next Bobby McFerrin, going to be the next, whoever that Quentin Marsalis, Branford Marsalis. There's someone in that classroom among those Black and brown students that's going to be the next whoever. And so I think it's imperative for us to first and foremost acknowledge it. If you see a really good clarinet player, trumpet player, it's our responsibility to nourish that. Because I just want to say this really quickly. I think as we're even talking about this discussion and as we're going through these topics, music as we know it today, we just need to be honest about this, is coming from a place of European, white, whatever. And so Blacks and brown students, I mean, even I, till this day, wrestle with where do we fit in this? And so one way to sort of have a seat at the table is to recognize that talent. The next thing that I think we can do is through the compositional process. I think composers, we're doing a lot more of this today than we have before, with a lot of the diversity initiatives that have been taking place in all of our respective organizations, championing Black composers, Black artists, and trying to get those guys out to the forefront. But if you have students, Black and brown students that are showing promise, and I think you should encourage that. But if they have a piece or two that they are doing that you like, wow, this is fantastic, let's read this. So you're giving them a platform right there, and who knows, there's probably going to be the next Omar Thomas in that group. It's going to be the next Alvin Singleton, the next Valerie Coleman, the next Quincy Hilliard, the next. So through the compositional process, I think it's a very tangible way of giving those students a voice. Another way we can do that, and we probably already do this more readily than anything else, is to provide effective leadership. Give those students some leadership roles. That could be through the drum major process, through elected office, section leader. I'm not saying, again, that's what I believe Shamika said earlier about lowering your standards. I mean, everything needs to be a fair process. You're not trying to give deference to this student just to achieve the whole Black Lives Matter. But I think if they had leadership roles, that will empower them, that will give them a voice, because then they can articulate issues that they may not have been able to do on other circumstances. So leadership roles are very, very important. I would also, and I really work hard to do this next one, is even in the music making process, particularly if you're from a community that is largely Caucasian and there's very few Black and brown students in there. You want to make sure that you're involving those students in the music making process, which means ask them questions, thoughtful questions about the music. What is your interpretation of this? How would you shape this? You do all those things. I feel like if I'd have had those opportunities a lot more myself growing up and coming through this profession, I think I would be more empowered. And one thing that I'm learning about all of this as I get older is that students regardless of what background they are, but particularly Black and brown students, I think they want a voice and I think they want to be validated. So if we can provide those initiatives, those particular steps in everything that we do, I think we're fostering inclusivity, and we're giving those kids a seat at the table. And before I let my colleague go on here, I just want to say, as I recount my experience as a band student, music student from middle school to high school, I was one of those kids that, because my upbringing was very, very volatile and poor, um, I really worked hard to try and get a seat at the table. And I remember telling my band director one time, coming from the South myself, I mean, he didn't think that one of them didn't think that I would amount to anything, told me actually that I should be a basketball player. And that has stuck with me for a long, long time. But it also compelled me to say, I'm going to show him. So and I did. And so I think those things there, through the compositional process, maybe featuring them as a soloist, giving them leadership roles, and giving them an opportunity to be part of the music making process in your classrooms, I think are very tangible ways of giving these Black and brown students a voice that they may not have had before.
Thank you so much. That was an incredible response. Anoa, do you have some thoughts about voice?
Yes. So I've calmed down a little bit. This one is where it hurts a little bit, guys. This one is where it hurts a little bit because of my experience. And I have all the respect for Wes. He came and did a clinic for me, and the thing about it was that those questions that you can ask, as he was saying, how should this be shaped? Those little things can really improve the whole vibe of what's happening in the room and get a buy-in, and I witnessed it. It was like magic. It was just like magic. So I agree with him 100%. I just had a few thoughts about it, and as a Black teacher as well, in a school, we have about, I want to say 50% ratio of Black and white students, but also, of course, there are Asian students, our Latinx students as well in there. But what I wanted to say was that as a Black teacher, I have had to find my voice as well. And I've had to model what that looks like for my students. And it looked a lot like some other things. It looks like me changing some of the curriculum I'm doing. It looks like me choosing a female band composer to play this year, or those kinds of things. So that modeling is important. But I wanted to share this book to you all. It is a book that was written in, I believe, 1933, and it is called The Miseducation of the Negro. I don't know if that's reading correctly, but it's called The Miseducation of the Negro. This is a very old book by Carter G. Woodson, who also helped us to have Black History Month. I've read it a few times, and I'm coming back to it now, especially with this session here that we're talking about. And I'm just going to read you a small portion of this before I just expand upon it. Okay, this is page 3. I didn't get that far, I guess. This page 3 is from the chapter, The Seed of the Trouble. And it says, as another has said well, to handicap a student by teaching him that his Black face is a curse and that his struggle to change his condition is hopeless is the worst sort of lynching. And that just struck me deeply, because even as a Black teacher, I sometimes choose things to do, to say, to be that are not helping my students thrive. And I'm suffocating them on, actually. And so with this sort of this word lynching, is, I know it's very, you know, it puts an image in your head, but I just want us to think that's how serious it can be when we're not really, you know, giving our students a voice in the classroom. And what voice means to me has a lot to do with representation and feeling like I am welcome, as I'm welcome, I have a seat at the table, as Wes was saying. And I think that we have to address it. So, I mean, just a few questions I had, you know, are you unconsciously suffocating, lynching the dreams of your Black students by reinforcing the image that Black people are doomed or inadequate or a lower class? Are you reinforcing white supremacy? In what ways is that happening, and how do we address this trauma that's happening? Okay, and I think for me, step one to do that is to sort of get ahead of this is empathy. We have to show empathy to these students. We have to sort of feel where they are at right now. That means we have to learn about our students. That means we have to ask them questions about themselves. Where do they come from? What sports do they like? If they weren't playing euphonium, you know, what else could they be doing with their spare time? I even heard some folks that I even went to some baseball games at times, or, you know, extra practice to sort of show, you know, you're not just your trombone, you know, you're not just your instrument for me. That's not all the time, but I think little things like that, a note, will go a long way, you know. Appreciate the diversity in your classroom. And I think a part of that is also not only saying, oh, you're great, you're awesome, everybody's welcome, but who are you inviting into your classroom? Because again, I keep saying it, but representation does matter. I can't tell you, you know, this is so funny that me and Wes are on this. I cannot tell you that he's the first Black man that has been to my school, in my classroom. I cannot tell you how my Black boys were just over the moon. They were buzzing and buzzing and buzzing and buzzing, you know, for days. And I could always talk about that experience with them. But also as a male, the boys in my classroom, all of them, kind of like, they were different, you know? And I feel like that appreciation, even of our gender diversity, that really plays a huge role in giving our students access to voice, access to their feeling of being represented. I wanted to say also, learn your students. These students are feisty. They are Gen X, I think that's their thing. They're Gen X. I heard, you know, kind of like spiritual words like indigo, star child, you know, all these little things. And they fight me sometimes. They're like, no, Miss Green, I don't like that piece. And, you know, let's do Incredibles this year. And I think that even doing that will allow them to sort of like come out and be a part of that process. Again, listen, find ways to allow students to express themselves. Some of them will not say it. They may need to write it, and they may need to use Jamboard or some type of anonymous thing to say. Do student reflections at the end of the year. That's going to be really massive for changing things. And then I would say, just do it. You know, it doesn't take 100 years to make these changes. You can do this day by day, and you can do it now. Jane Elliott, are you all familiar? Jane Elliott, she's an activist. She's all over the place right now talking about race. And she says we're all cousins, you know, we're all the human race. We're all the same, you know, we just, you know, 67 cousins. And if we could just sort of get that inside of us and say, okay, if we are cousins, it is no sweat off my back to figure out your life and where you're going, you know, where you're at. It's no sweat off my back. You know, we really need to be thinking like, we're here. We're not, this is not what's cute anymore. So I would say that. And then lastly, model behavior you want to see. Just keep modeling it. It will work. So thank you.
Thank you both so much. Jenny, on to you.
Okay, so our next area that we're going to be discussing is growth. And this question is for Damien and Shamika. Learning is not an identical process for all kids. How can we best facilitate progress for students? And what tools might kids need in addition to what we have planned so that they can succeed? And we're going to start with Damien on this one.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to be here. Well, it's been great discussion so far. It's amazing stuff. I'm just glad to have the platform. Yeah, I wrote down a few things concerning this question. I think that first of all, we all have to believe that no matter where a kid comes from, that they can do it. No matter what their background is, no matter what they've been through, that we have to stick with that fact that all kids can. And then we have to use everything in our power to remove all roadblocks. So I thought about that. I do a lot of guest conducting, and it's true, Anoa and Wes, when I go into a band room and the Black kids, just some of them just freeze. They miss every interest because they're just staring at me because they've never seen this before. And so, and so I think that part of getting kids to grow, of course, you have to have a relationship with them. They have to trust you. You have to be genuine. You have to be honest, but you have to expose them to greater things. So fantastic musicians, fantastic conductors, and especially if you can expose our kids to Black conductors and Black musicians, it goes a long way to helping them grow, but to open up their world, to broaden their horizons, to believe they can do it. And we've all said this too, to make sure that we keep excellence at the top. Because so many times people come into our communities and they start to treat the kids like they're community service projects, and everything is unicorns and lilies. And I hate that so much, you should demand from them what you demand from your kid, from your brother or sister, but you may have to take away some of the roadblocks. So kids who are not taking private lessons, you may have to reach out to the local symphony orchestra that always has money for community engagement. That's a big thing now, community engagement. They can have musicians come out and do things with your kids. The local, I think the local community bands is another place. So you can have kids take private lessons, but to broaden their horizons, to take them places they've never gone before, to introduce them to people who look like them, who are fantastic at what they do is great. And then they also have to know who Fred Fennell is. They've got to know who Harry Beejan is. They got to know who H. Robert Reynolds is. They got to know who all these folks are too. So we can use technology, bring them in. When I was at Southfield Latham High School, Professor Reynolds would come in twice a year to work with my kids, and it was a big deal to them and it helped them grow. I think, again, you have to be honest. And when I was at Southfield Latham High School, my band was mostly Black. And we were playing Lincoln Sharposi that year for a festival. And I said to them, I said, listen, I said, there's some folks who are going to be so excited that you're doing this piece. I said, there are going to be some people who are going to think that we're crazy. So I need you to know this piece backwards and forward. And when you get off the bus, I need you to be quiet. When you sit in the audience, be quiet, be respectful. But when you get on stage, I need you to play the hell out of this, right? Because that's one of the tools we have to teach the kids is perseverance, right? How to overcome what people may think about you and what they believe, but also to expose them, once again, to the best literature, to the best composers. I mean, you got Omar out there doing things. You got Valerie, Granger, all this stuff, expose them to all those things. And I think that really helps. But just to go back to this once again, don't lower the standard, right? Don't lower the standard. Stick to what you believe is right, but just, let them trust you, understand them, and show them the world. So that's kind of my thought on that. I hope that helps.
That was tremendous, Damien. Thank you so much. What a great message that we're hearing about standards here too. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Shamika, let's have you address that question now on growth.
Okay, so in terms of growth, I think it's important to think of all your students and not just the Black students that you have in your classes. I would do this same thing for all of my students, regardless of their ethnic background, and that's to have words of praise in the class, and especially from the podium. you want to have a lot of words of prayer, because we have a lot of power from the podium, but we want to avoid situations that make students feel shame, you know. So, for example, I remember I was a student at Interlochen, and this was my first time there, and I didn't understand the challenge system. I had auditioned there. I had my alto saxophone, and I had signed up for concert band, but I didn't understand that that you had to play a tenor saxophone if you went down, or a bari saxophone, or if you moved up to the next group, you had to start on bari saxophone. Okay, well, that was the situation, and I didn't have any bari sax reeds. Nobody told me I was going to be playing bari sax. Right. And I don't even remember how I got the reeds, but I remember the conductor from the podium making remarks about the quality of sound. And here I was thinking, I came here to play alto saxophone. I wasn't prepared to play bari saxophone. And I was furious because I was like, don't you understand that you all gave me this instrument and I wasn't prepared? So I remember that the private lesson teacher was John Sampa, and he was such a gentle spirit. And I remember that I went to talk to him because I felt that I could, because of his just demeanor, his relationship. And I explained to him, I was like, I didn't know I had to do this. And I think he helped me find some bari sax reeds. And I remember he also talked to Donald Center, and Don Center came, I wasn't his student. He came to find me and to talk to me, and just to make sure that everything was okay, and to explain the process to me. And I'm not sure if they talked to the conductor or anything like that afterwards, but I just brought up that story to say, if there's a student and you know that they have potential, from that podium, you have to make sure that you never have a student to feel shame or humiliation from you from the podium, because the kids, they always look up to you. So in terms of growth, you want to make sure that if there's a problem and something's not quite right, you have to find that way to talk to the students and get everything fixed and go in the way that you want it to without making them feel any humiliation. And one way that I do that is to teach the students to self-diagnose the problems that are going on with the ensemble and constantly listen. So I make sure that we record a lot, and we're always reflecting, always analyzing. And I let them tell me what's wrong. And then a lot of times, so if something happens and the kids will say, it's that trumpet section. Or, if so-and-so start playing so loud on the baritone over there, then maybe we can do this better, Or if the flute section can be a little quieter, we can have the appropriate balance, Miss Dan. So I'll say, well, no, we're not going to say that. We're not going to call you name. We're going to say, well, we need a higher wind. You know what I mean? So I have to go back and fix all of that. And then, of course, then the drum major would be like, yes, Miss Nash, it was not the flute section. It's just all the higher winds need to listen, But so I have to be diligent to make sure that I try my best to teach the kids to self-diagnose, but in a way that doesn't inflict harm, And also, just continue to facilitate the progress with positive encouragement, power thoughts, and positive affirmations, getting the kids to say that they can play. Or I can't do this concerto. I can't play that third movement of the concerto. Also, in terms of like tools that students might need, and then this could be more specifically for students of color. If a student has potential, I remember at my high school they had an instrument scholarship for rising juniors that were interested in becoming music majors. So they may have had an instrument already, but the scholarship was to get them like a semi-pro horn or upgrade the instrument so that when they went to university level, they had something better to play with. So maybe at your school, if you're in a high school, maybe even if middle school level, if your booster group can establish an instrument scholarship, not to just provide like a student level instrument, but if there's a student that has potential, you help that student get a better instrument in their hands so that they can have a better chance to succeed when they do go to University of Michigan, they go to Northwestern or Eastman, wherever, so that they don't have to take out a loan just to get a quality instrument, Also, in terms of other tools they may need, this is for all the kids, they may need headphones at home if they live in an apartment, and they may need more practice time at school. So if there's a student that has a lot of potential, they may need to practice more at school. Because if they live in an apartment, their parents are not going to let them play too much to disturb the neighbors, even if they have a lot of talent. So you may have to welcome them with the door open, in the band room. If you're there working late, they can stay and practice too, and communicate that back and forth with the parents that they're going to stay here late. And sometimes I'll have like 12, 15 kids just still there practicing till 7 o'clock because that they know that they have stuff to work on and they can't do it at home. And sometimes, depending on where the student lives, they may not want to carry their instrument home on the bus or something like that. But if I'm there working late and the parent is cool, they can stay and practice. So let's see, other tools. Obviously, smart music. I don't have a budget for my program, but I got smart music, so fundraiser funds go to pay for that. And I just like it because of, the students don't have lessons and there's so much information that they can get from smart music when they're not with me. And also make sure that they have portable music stands and talking to the students specifically about how to practice at home. When they practice at home, they can't sit on the bed, can't sit on the couch. You have to show them, okay, you see these sturdy chairs we have here in the band room? You need to go get that kitchen table, the chair from the kitchen table, okay? Take that to your room, and that's what you sit down and you practice with. You don't sit on the bed, because you have to still, if you're going to practice at home, you got to have the right posture. You got to have that music stand. Don't have the music on your bed, and then you're looking at it like that. So just being very specific and what they need to do to continue that growth process at home. Also, make sure that you attend a lot of concerts with the students, especially my jazz group. We go to concerts all the time. Go to the Logan Center. We're lucky in Chicago that we have a lot of organizations that will give us tickets. We go and see just a whole lot of different groups. Make sure that you bring in groups and artists to the school. When I go down the Midwest, if somebody says that their Army band can come, I'm calling you in January and I'm going to set up something, because so that's what we did. We had the Army rock band come to Morgan Park High School. They brought a rig in. They set up the whole deal, and the kids were so excited from that, But so make sure you bring, and don't forget the chamber of music groups. We had the chamber winds from Chicago come in and play, and just with a Whirlwind quintet to play. I think that's also really important to make sure, try to, not all in one year, but over the course of like a student cycle in your program, try to make sure you hit the different types of groups. And the last thing is to make sure that you talk to all the students about all the possible careers in the music industry, because they have to understand that it's not just performing artists, it's not just band directors or your private lesson teacher, but they need to make sure that they understand that you have arrangers and composers, you have mixing and all these different things. Like in my band room, I bought a mixer so I could teach the students how to hook up the microphones, how to mix, what the different sounds are. And I'm not a professional with it. Whatever I learned, I've shared it with them, because a lot of our students even work with the audio at church. But they need to understand that that's a viable career option. They need to understand about lighting, just even different things legally in the entertainment industry. So I always try to talk to students and make them aware of paths that they can take if they're interested and they still don't, they don't want to play the instrument. There's a lot of paths that they can continue on once they graduate from my program.
Wow, Shamika, thank you so much. What great ideas. And thank you also for sharing that personal story about your experience with Interlochen. That was very inspiring. Thank you. I'm going to toss it back to Laura now, who's going to ask our last question.
Yes, so our last topic is on flexibility. It'll first go to Damien and then to Wes. With flexibility, children and communities are changing all the time. How can we be more responsive to our kids and our communities?
Very good. Yeah, Shamika, that was great. Wow, I was like, wow, that's good stuff. I I think that we have to, no matter where we are, we have to know the community. We have to know the community inside and out and get to know students. I have, one of my best friends is Ed Quick. And by the way, Wes, Ed said hello. And Ed is a white gentleman who had a fantastic career teaching band in Detroit. He had amazing bands at King High School. Rodney Whitaker, head of jazz studies at MSU, was one of his students, DSA. So I asked him, I said, how in the world did you do that? You know, you're this white guy, you've taught in Detroit. What's up with that? He said, you know what? I learned the community. He said, the first thing I did, he said, I read the autobiography of Malcolm X. He said, and he changed my perspective and it changed my approach totally. He says, so I got a chance to know the community, understand. I think that's important. And we have to be flexible, right? Once we know the community, we have to change some things. When I finished at University of Michigan, when I taught at Southfield Latham High School, it was a mostly African-American program. And like I said, I had the kids playing host and Vaughn Williams and Granger. And I had this marching band that was still a chorus style marching band, right? So like 3 or 4 years in, a group of kids cornered me in the office and they were really serious. They said, listen, Mr. Crutcher, we love you. We love symphonic band. We love jazz band, but we cannot do this chorus style marching band anymore. And I said, why? They said, because we're embarrassed. The other high school is high stepping like the black colleges. And we look like fools out there doing Somewhere Over the Rainbow on the field in front of our friends. And they were so serious about it until I said, okay, I said, it's great. I said, you know, I wasn't in marching band. We didn't have one at Cass Tech. I said, all I know is core style. I said, but you know what? I will see what we could do. We'll change. I talked to the booster group. They hired me some folks to help me. And we switched over to the black style high stepping band. And it was the best move I've ever made in my whole career, because the band program just exploded. I had all kinds of kids coming into the program. And so I think we have to be flexible. We have to understand the community. We have to listen to the kids. We have to let down our guard. We have to be vulnerable, right? We don't know everything. We have to come to grips with that. And then the kids sometimes have the best answers. So that's what stood out to me, for me, was being flexible and understanding their community and how it worked for me in my career at Southfield Latham.
Fantastic. Wes, what about you?
Wow, well, you know, it's hard to follow this because both Damien and Shamika took a lot of my answers. So I'm going to go ahead and, but the running theme here, I believe, that resonates with all of us, and I'm sure Anoa would agree with this, is definitely community. And I'll say this through the lens of being a Black or brown student, and this is from experience. You know, to relate to that student, you need to know the community by which that student is coming from. And that's not just Black people, that's any community. But when it comes to Black people, Black and brown, what I've found is you need to know maybe the socioeconomic aspect of that student, what resources they have or don't have, what can they do? And again, another personal story, not to make this all about me, but you know, being in high school, anybody that knows me will tell you, coming from small town Marshall, Texas, Wesley walked 3.5 miles every day one way with a trombone in one hand and books in the other hand, because we didn't have anything. We were that poor. I did that every day. I still don't know how I did it, but I did it every day. So if you have a student that's like that, I was also one of those students that, as I think what Shamika had intimated before, where you have students that are practicing, you know, because they want to. I not only did it because I wanted to after school, but it was also because I wanted to do it to avoid going home, because I didn't want to face the band room or the music room was my safe haven. That was my family. And so I related when she was telling that story about her students. I mean, I was that kid. And so I think you want to know the community by which these students are coming from. And if you know what the resources that they have or don't have, this will inform how much personal attention do I need to give this student. If they can't afford private lessons, would you be willing to stay after and give them lessons? Would you be willing to work with them? One of the best things I'll ever remember is whenever I had a couple of trumpet students that I would stay after school with, and those kids just loved that, because then we would do duets and trios. That was more for them than they'll ever get, that they've ever gotten in their life. So also, do they need an instrument? How can you help them obtain an instrument? More practice times. A lot of this was what both Shamika and Damien had intimated, but I mean, this was definitely what I do. And I just want to say in closing, at the university level, what I try to do nowadays is everything that they talked about at the public school level, I do in many ways at the university level. I don't think these two are separate. Giving more attention to those Black and brown students, because my university, we have a lot of first generation students. We also have a lot of students that just don't have the means. And so anything that I can do to help them along the way, I would definitely do.
Wonderful. Thank you both. And really to all four of you, this has just been incredibly impactful. Thank you so much for being here. Pass it off to Lori to facilitate some question and answers.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everyone, for your wonderful answers. We're going to open it up to the entire group here to see if we have any questions. And actually, a question was sent to me privately from someone who knew that I was going to be asking questions. So this person sent it. So I'll ask it. And then of the four of you, whoever would like to jump in, please do so. And if all four of you would like to answer, that would be fine as well. How can directors lead in creating open dialogue between the students themselves as it relates to Black Lives Matter? Building understanding through music, especially in areas where Black and brown students are not well represented in our classrooms. What is the best way for directors to address underlying tension, interactions, and implicit bias we as teachers observe between music students? Who would like to go first?
I can point out that if you need lessons that are related to music, you can go to teachrock.org. They have some lessons that they've recently updated in terms of like protest song, other things that are going on. You can use some of the lessons there. And then in terms of like bias and things like that from the podium, like I tried to explain before, maybe as conductors, we have a lot of power from the podium. And, just the same way that if you want to cut off on beat 3 and you expect everybody in that group to cut off on 3, that it's the same way that you get the bias to stop in your group. If you stand on that podium and say, we're not having this, period. If you know that you have that type of power with your group and your students, then it just simply comes from you and you don't tolerate it. Because if you think to yourself and you have a huge group of students and you just accomplished something great with them all, and you've gotten them to do exactly what they're supposed to do, then you can also make sure that you cut that out and let them know explicitly that you just don't tolerate it. And then, and we have a lot of power with the students because we see them for more than 1 year, which we all know. And we have a lot of power to change the community because we see parents and students, maybe in my case, I see them for 6 years sometimes because they start in 7th grade and then, graduate in 12th grade. But we have a lot of weight and power in the community to make the change. And you can just basically just do it from the podium, I think.
Thank you, Shamika. Would anyone else like to answer that question? Wes?
Yeah, and I agree totally with Shamika on this. Another way that we might be able to do this, which I think we're already doing a little bit of, is our programming and what we do, what we're playing on our concerts, and are we featuring? Now, I'm going to say something that I want to clarify here, because this has been a little contentious. I am so for us programming more ethnic composers, but yet at the same time, I don't want us to do that just to serve a particular need. I mean, a composer should be represented because of who he or she is in the music and the quality of that music. But in terms of addressing some of the biases and things, if our students can see a plethora of different composers, as we do with different genders, I just feel like, and I say all of that with music. I've said this a few times, because you know, with us being music teachers and conductors, the music is our curriculum. That's what we teach from, and the quality of that music. We teach a lot of things through music. We teach music history. We teach voice. We teach community. We teach so many things through that music. And so the more diverse our composers are, in addition to having those composers present, if at all possible, if you can have an Omar Thomas or Valerie Coleman or Alvin Singleton or Quincy Hilliard, or those guys in your, you know, so that they can see that, I think that will be impactful as well.
Thank you, Wes.
If I could just add one quick thing to what both Shamika and Wesley said. I think once you do those things, then it's a good place to have honest conversations with your students. You know, once again, being genuine, having that relationship, making sure that your band room is a safe place for folks to ask questions. Like, you know, your white kids have to feel like they can ask a question and get an answer. Your Black kids feel safe. Everyone feels secure, and that we have this space where we trust each other to have those conversations. I tend to think that younger kids are less hung up on things than we are overall. But if you do those things that Shamika and Wes talked about, and then open it up for conversation, I think it's a good thing, for sure.
Thank you, Damien. Anoa, did you want to add anything to this?
Yes, I was just going to say that with that safe space, there is a thing called restorative practices, and it was something that we were sort of introduced to at our school as well this year. There is training for it, but I think if you're interested, that is something that would really be good. And before I knew it, almost like the next day after we were introduced to it, it was a blow up in the classroom. You know, somebody had said something to somebody else about their hair, you know, in another room, and they followed it all the way to my room, my band room. And just a nightmare. But it was a great moment to say, okay, guys, you know, let's get into a restorative circle and let's talk. We cannot move on. We are not going to learn a B flat scale today unless, you know, this is settled, because, you know, it's just not, you can't move on. You have to, deflate the situation. You have to do that. So I think that's a good way and to address it by having students talk one at a time, you know, one at a time. Our rules are this is a no judgment zone. Everybody's going to have a chance to say if you know, whether you like it or not, you know, everybody's going to have a chance to speak, you know, from their own experience. And then secondly, I wanted to say, you know, you could talk about the platinum rule. I just, you know, started learning about this, but treat others the way they want to be treated is very, very important. Not the golden rule where treat others the way you want to be treated, because other people don't have the same values as you, etc. So like for maybe a Black student or in my school, some of them, if you step on my white Jordans, we're going to have some problems. Okay. You know, that's a disrespect, you know, those are fighting words. So you have to figure out a way to catch them before they escalate any further, and say, oh, we're going to sizzle this down. We're going to talk about it. And we can lose 15 minutes of our rehearsal if it would engender community, as Wes was talking about, you know, allow us to feel more close, you know, that we can trust each other and move on. So just wanted to note that.
Great. Thank you all. We have one final question that I'm going to read from our comment section, because I think that a lot of people are probably thinking this as well. So this comes from one of our attendees watching right now that says, I teach kindergarten through 5th grade in a 65% more or less Black community. I noticed almost all of the panelists referring to Black composers and Black communities. My question is about vocabulary. Is it okay to use the term Black in reference to the people, or is it better to use African American? I'm asking from being a white person who is often unsure what's best. Shamika,
I can explain a little bit. So if you go back and how we got to the word Black, so when we first arrived to the country, we were first called slaves, and then Negro, and then nigger, and then colored, and then Black. So for people from an older generation, like my mom was born in 1942, so for her and her mom and her dad, Black meant all the same thing as slave, nigger, Negro, colored. That meant the same thing. So that generation wanted to get away from those 5 terms, and then we had African American. But now we're at the point where there's so many other people from the diaspora that are here in this country that they're not actually African American. They may be Cuban, they may be Dominican. And so now, as a general term, people are just referring to themselves as Black and not necessarily African American, because they're not necessarily directly from the continent, if that makes sense. So right now, Black is an acceptable term. However, if you're talking to an older African American, maybe someone over 60, they may still prefer African American, because quite frankly they came from a generation where they all believe that all 5 of those terms meant the same thing, and they prefer still, like my mom and my aunt would prefer African American. But for my generation, younger people, Black is okay, because we are thinking again about being inclusive for all people.
I actually asked this question. I had taught in a predominantly Black community for many, many years, and I wanted to know myself too. So I asked several parents and other colleagues, and the first thing, before even answering the question, what they said to me was, thanks for asking. Thanks for just taking the time to ask. So I think that this is smart that we asked that question. Would anybody else like to jump in here on this final question?
I just wanted to say that that's not going to be for everybody, that they want to be called Black or they want to be called African American. You will need to at times go on a case-to-case basis, just as you may want to ask, you know, what is your preferred pronoun? Maybe not like that. You may not want to say it like that, but you know, you want people to be able to offer what they would like to be called. But you know, yeah, I think that you do need to make sure you ask to. Because I'm sorry, but Black is considered negative, can be negative. It was, you know, in terms of the creation of that word to describe us, from Europeans, it's a word that was invented to describe us. And it often means negative things. And so that is the part that I think with the Black Lives Matter movement, we are trying to heal. And just like I hate to say it, but not hate to say it, but the N word, we're trying to take that word back and empower ourselves. I think that's what's happening with the being called Black. But again, you need to ask, you know.
I noticed, Wesley, you would say Black and brown students.
Yeah, I both Shamika and Anoa hit this right on the money. I was just going to add to this. With that said, I know that some people, like, it depends on, you'll get one perspective or one feeling if you're called Black from a white person, as opposed to being called Black from a Black person. So maybe a Black teacher could get away with, you know, generalizing all of this and saying Black. And so what I was going to say to that is, I think someone said earlier about, I think Anoa, asking, you know, you just want to ask. You want to ask as a white teacher, you know, there are ways of doing that, but I think that's a way of getting around it. But just be cognizant of the fact that certain words in the Black and brown community will be okay if they were from Black and brown people, as opposed. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah, so that I was thinking a lot about that, and I thought, well, you know, if Shamika said, you know, Black, you know, referred to me, I would not have a problem with that personally. But if someone else, like yourself or whoever, would refer to me, now I'm at an age where that doesn't bother me. But as what Anoa said, that's a very testy word, and you just got to know the community where you are, how acceptable that is, and I think you can end up coming out of that okay. But just ask. Yeah.
Damien, did you have anything to add to that? No. Great. So we're going to end our questions there. We are going to talk a little bit about what's coming up next with Women Banding Together. And if it's okay, I'm going to ask all four of you in my little spiel about what's coming up next. May I use the word Black? Great. Okay. Awesome. All right. This conversation has been insightful and motivating as we prepare to return to our classrooms, rehearsal halls, and private studios in whatever form that may look like. Thank you to all of our panelists for their strength, wisdom, and kindness as they shared with all of us today. In reflecting on our classrooms and communities through the lens of Black Lives Matter, as our title was today, it is important, though, that we hear from all Black and brown members of our classrooms and communities, including students and parents. As a follow-up panel discussion to today's event, we plan to have Black students and their parents reflect on their educational experiences and expectations through the lens of Black Lives Matter. As the heartbeat of our communities, how do students and parents feel we, the music educators, can be responsive to their needs? How will they feel most safe? How do they hope to have a voice and choice in their education? What additional tools do they hope we implement through our teaching? Please join us for this empowering follow-up session on Monday, August 17th to advocate for the student perspective. The time for this upcoming panel discussion will be determined at a closer date, and reminders will be sent to those on our email list and shared on our Facebook page. So we hope that you join us for that follow-up session. And I'm going to hand it back to Jenny.
Thanks. As we close today's session, like Lori said, I'd like to thank once again our panelists for their invaluable insights, their powerful stories, your amazing suggestions and helpful resources. We will be sharing many of those resources with you in our follow-up email. And I'd like to share a closing quote from Cornelius Minor's article, since it served as the inspiration for our questions today. There is no right answer. Rather, it's the questions that help us think about what actions or changes might lead to better outcomes for all of our students, particularly those who are underserved by traditional schooling. And he goes on to say, when we make the conscious decision to address persisting injustices, this broadens access to justice for everyone. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ginny to close us out. Thank you all again to all of our panelists.
I want to add my thanks too to Wes, Damien, Anoa, and Shamika for your wisdom and for sharing that with us today. So it was a fabulous session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I also want to thank everyone who joined us for participating in this session, and we'll be sending out a survey that we'd like for you to complete along with the links to resources and dates of upcoming events. In addition to the event that Lori mentioned on August 17th, our next event is going to be a happy hour on Wednesday, July 29th at 4 p.m. And in this one, we're actually going to have a conversation with a woman from Australia who's been following us since Women Banding Together started, Yvonne Brown, and she's going to talk about the best practices that they've been using already now that they're back in their music classrooms. So it should be a great conversation with her. Please join us again, and also please keep help spreading the word about women banding together. We just so enjoyed being with all of you, and especially so grateful to this wonderful panel of guests that we had today. Thank you all so much. Bye.